The man accused of killing Charlie Kirk reportedly made jokes to friends about the manhunt just hours after he allegedly killed the conservative influencer. Investigators say he made references to the cartoon Garfield, Luigi Mangione, allegedly saying his, quote, doppelganger was the one who killed Charlie Kirk in front of thousands of people. Let's go over those shocking messages and what we're now learning about what may have motivated the 22-year-old to allegedly kill Charlie Kirk. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old, is expected to make his first court appearance Tuesday in Utah to face charges for the first time for allegedly killing Charlie Kirk. Here's Robinson's mugshot after his dad and a youth minister helped turn him into authorities on Thursday night last week. Right now, he's being held in a special unit of a jail in Utah where he can be watched around the clock. The authorities say that Robinson killed Kirk in a political assassination, but specifically why Robinson would allegedly kill Charlie Kirk has not yet been disclosed. Now, I'll get into what we do know about his roommate and what the alleged romantic relationship with that roommate could tell us about a possible motive in just a moment. But I want to talk about Tyler Robinson and what he reportedly told people about the Kirk assassination before we knew he was the suspect, and apparently before his friends knew he was the suspect. While the motive may somewhat be up for debate, it is very clear that this 22-year-old spent a lot of time online. He played a lot of video games, and he chatted with people on Discord, which is a messaging app that gamers often use. The New York Times has text messages that Robinson sent friends on Discord in the hours after Charlie Kirk was killed, and he allegedly didn't shy away from at least having conversation about the story that at that point had grabbed headlines around the world. Now, you remember this picture, the person of interest photo that law enforcement put out. The man with sunglasses, a hat with a triangle logo on it, and an American flag shirt. Now, in this group chat that Tyler Robinson was reportedly a part of, a friend sent this picture noting that the person of interest looked like Tyler Robinson, and on the app, the friend made a joke at Tyler saying, quote, WYA with a skull emoji, or where you at? Now, Robinson allegedly responded saying that his, quote, doppelganger was trying to get him into trouble. Now, whoever the texter wasn't the only person who noticed the resemblance between Tyler Robinson and the person of interest photo. According to the FBI, Tyler's own family saw the picture and then confronted him about whether he was the killer. And that's when they brought him to the police station. Now, the group chat reportedly continued with someone joking, quote, Tyler killed Charlie. All of this was happening around 1 p.m. Thursday last week, which was around 24 hours after the Kirk assassination and about 9 hours before Robinson was turned into the police station. The group chat continued with a user mentioning the $100,000 reward that the FBI had put out for information leading to an arrest and how they should probably turn Robinson in. Again, seemingly joking, not realizing that Robinson was actually the person who allegedly killed Charlie Kirk. And Robinson responded to that, saying, quote, only if I get a cut, with a picture of John Arbuckle, who is the cat Garfield's owner in that famous comic strip series. Now, the jokes weren't done in this group chat. Another friend said that Robinson should not go to McDonald's, which is a nod to Luigi Mangione, who was arrested at a McDonald's in Altoona in central Pennsylvania after allegedly killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan. To which Tyler Robinson allegedly said, quote, better also get rid of this manifesto and the exact copy rifle I have lying around. Now, the FBI said they found the rifle that Robinson allegedly used to kill Charlie Kirk in a wooded area near Utah Valley University, a high-powered bolt-action rifle with a scope that Robinson allegedly used to fire one round from 200 yards away on top of a building that struck Charlie Kirk in the neck. Now, Robinson then hinted at the type of political motivation behind this shooting, saying the shooter, quote, clearly was from California. He also seemed to mention the inscriptions on the unused shell casings that the FBI found by the rifle. At the time, there was a report out saying that there were transgender sayings on the rounds, and in the group chat, Robinson allegedly said that those must have been fabricated by a member of law enforcement, saying it was, quote, a dude in the briefing room. Now, he might have thought by playing it off as a joke in this group chat, he could push his friends off the trail that he had left behind, but the FBI says they tracked Robinson's car from Utah Valley Valley University, where this shooting happened, to his family home in southwestern Utah, roughly 3 hours away. And we saw a car that fit the description of the vehicle the FBI said he drove, parked outside the family home in Washington, Utah. The group chat also wasn't the only Discord conversation that Robinson allegedly had related to the Kirk killing. He also spoke to someone who law enforcement called his roommate in the police report. Police contacted that roommate, and the roommate showed them messages that Tyler sent. The affidavit reads that Tyler allegedly stated that he needed to retrieve a rifle from drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact Tyler in this Discord conversation also mentioned that he had, quote, changed outfits. Now, the roommate is cooperating with investigators, according to law enforcement, but that roommate may be at the center of what the motive was for this alleged political assassination. Axios reports the roommate was someone who Robinson was in a romantic relationship with, and that roommate was a transgender person. They were transitioning from a man to a woman. Axios said that sources told them that the roommate was, quote, aghast that Robinson was the alleged killer, and the roommate turned over all messages with Robinson when they were informed. Kirk was critical of the transgender community. In fact, he was giving an answer to a question related to members of the transgender community in mass shootings at the time he was shot. Axios says authorities are looking into whether Robinson wanted to allegedly kill Kirk because of Kirk's views on gender identity. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said authorities are looking into how Robinson reportedly became radicalized. Family members told authorities that Robinson became more political in recent years, but it's unclear how he got to that point and where he allegedly decided that he wanted to kill Charlie Kirk. Cox also said that they're looking into whether leftist groups had any knowledge of Robinson's plan ahead of time. Not everyone, though, believes that Robinson is the one who killed Charlie Kirk. His grandmother spoke to the Daily Mail. She said that the authorities have the wrong guy. She said the Robinson family, they're all Republicans who supported Donald Trump, and she doesn't know of any Democrats in her family. But Utah Governor Cox said on Meet the Press that Robinson's political beliefs were very different from his family's. Now, we know that Robinson allegedly spoke of how he didn't like Charlie Kirk before the assassination. According to his arrest document, at a dinner before September 10th, he allegedly mentioned that Kirk was going to be in Utah at Utah Valley University as part of a college campus tour. Before I get back to this episode of On the Case, one of the most watched shows on YouTube, I need to talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. They have more than 1,000 attorneys and they win a lot. They've recovered over $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. And in the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. Even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to file a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you've been hurt and you need to start a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also scan this QR code on your screen or click the link below. Governor Cox also said, as everyone's trying to figure out a motive, it's important to look at the world that Robinson was part of online. He said, quote, clearly there was a lot of gaming going on. Friends have confirmed that there was kind of that deep, dark internet, the Reddit culture, and these other dark places of the internet where this person was going deep. That is clear in the inscriptions on the shell casings found by the alleged murder weapon left behind after the attack. And here are the inscriptions that we know about and what it appears that they mean. The first one read, quote, notices bulge OWO. What's this? Now that's a reference to a meme that's on the internet. And here's the original meme per the account Know Your Meme on X. It's a lot to explain, but it's a line that people use in some deep parts of the internet to troll people. For our purposes though, it again shows that Robinson was very much online a lot. The next casing allegedly read, hey fascist, catch, with an up arrow symbol, a right arrow symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. Now these arrows seem to be a video game reference of some kind, and it's what you would use for a combination in the game Helldivers 2, a third-person shooter game that was released last year. Another example that Tyler Robinson allegedly spent a lot of time locked into screens. Another unfired casing reportedly said, "Oh Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao." Now those are lyrics to a song that was sung by Italians who fought against occupying Nazi forces during World War II. In the United States, it's become a rallying cry for anti-fascist and leftist groups, and it's been sang at protests in recent years. The last unfired casing allegedly read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." Now, these casings are key evidence in proving that this was an alleged politically motivated attack beyond the fact that Charlie Kirk himself was a political figure speaking at a political event. Authorities said when Robinson was confronted about the shooting by his dad, he confessed or alluded to being the person responsible. Governor Cox said this weekend that Robinson is not cooperating with investigators and he has not confessed to authorities. Cox also said that Robinson was, quote, "deeply indoctrinated by leftist ideology." Joining us now is retired NYPD Detective David Sarney. Thanks for taking the time to be with us as we're kind of learning a little bit more about Tyler Robinson and how he communicated with people after allegedly killing, and we'll say alleged because it's innocent until proven guilty, and we'll see how the legal process plays out in the murder of Charlie Kirk. But since we've learned that Tyler Robinson's the person who authorities say did this, 22-year-old from Utah, what stands out to you with this suspect?
Again, thank you for having me. Again, we're seeing another 20-something-year-old involving himself or herself into this violent, just radicalizing themselves to become violent and then take their aggressions out on people they've never met. They just develop this whole thing in their minds. They see clips or whatever they're looking at and then develop this, and they self-radicalize. That's what it seems to be. This kid comes from a relatively good home. It's nothing that should be out of the ordinary. I mean, he went to college and all of a sudden he transformed into this radicalized individual. And this is what we're concerned about. We're seeing younger and younger shooters involved. That's something that stands out to me greatly. I mean, the crime itself, fantastic work by the investigators involved to get 33 hours and get somebody identified that quickly. It's immense amount of investigative work and the resources available. But that sticks out to me is that we're seeing a lot of young people who cannot handle things out of their lifestyle and just radicalize themselves to become so violent and decide to, kid has no criminal record. And then he decides to go off and shoot somebody he's never met before.
Well, and it's too, like, you look at what he's accused of doing, and it's not just, and this wouldn't have been any better, but I remember in the initial part of this, the internet convicted this older man who was, it seemed like he was in the crowd and he was detained and everybody's like, they got the shooter. Even Utah Valley University said we had the guy, and then that was just bad information. I mean, this was planned. I mean, he's from 200 yards out on top of a building, and to go from no criminal record to an assassination allegedly with a sniper rifle, that just is something that seems, at least to me, on a completely different level. I mean, what do you make of the planning, it seems, that went into this? Not only knowing that where Charlie Kirk was going to be because he's on tour, but to know the building he was going to be in, to allegedly be on, shooting at someone where Charlie Kirk was going to be. It just seems like the level of planning of this brought it to a completely different level.
That's the other thing, too. I mean, we're seeing more and more of these, and this is becoming, unfortunately, a consistent pattern. The planning to do what they're doing happens. It's the aftermath, which is beneficial to the police because they plan to do their action, but as far as the direction of flight or the flight they do is always flawed, which is beneficial for law enforcement to do. But again, you're seeing this. This is 200 yards away to fire one round and do what he did. That takes practice. It takes some skill. But the skill of the shoot is different than the skill of the flight, which is, again, back to the beneficial part of that. But we talk about social media. We're talking about this whole world that he created for himself and becomes such an individual where he was so social, and now he's no longer social. He becomes this anti-fascist, and this word comes up all the time, and we'll deal with that at another point. But we're seeing this planning, this operation. These kids this is not mental illness. This is definitely not mental illness. We keep going through that. It's not mental illness. What he's doing is a calculated assassination. This is what it seems to be based on what we have now. Again, he has to be innocent. He's innocent, proven guilty. He has been arrested. So the prosecution is going to have to build all this information they have to then put it on trial.
I can see someone look at this investigation. You think of 33 hours, and I mean, that's, it took weeks to find Brian Kohberger. in Idaho. It took days to find Luigi Mangione, and eventually he's at the McDonald's in central PA. And in this case, you're talking less than 48 hours to track someone down. Really what lucked out, I think, for investigators is, let's kind of talk about that, because I think it was the picture they put out of this person of interest. And you even have Tyler Robinson's friends who are saying, this looks like you, and they didn't really realize it. But then you have a family member that comes forward and really does something that takes, I think, a lot of emotional strength to be able to turn someone in like that, knowing what he's going to face. But as far as the investigation goes, I mean, how much of this is strategy and how much is it luck that picture, you had a family member that saw it?
Well, that's when we talk about these investigations, they recover the firearm, which is great. They recover forensics off of the firearm and I believe a towel nearby. But the benefit of surveillance videos everywhere, and that's one thing that people do forget, there's so many surveillance videos, and be able to track from that point in time. And you have to go backwards and then go forward. So they probably went backwards from the shoot, just look for all the cameras that way, and then get photos of something that looks similar to the person maybe in flight, and then comparison to videos of a person entering the campus. So once you get the best video available, putting that surveillance photo out, you have to put those things out. The reason why is you want the public to get involved. Because when you talk about these investigations, you only have maybe dozens of eyes as investigators. When that photo goes out, you have hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, looking at that photo. And this is where you see his friends going, I think that looks like you. And I credit what the work was done, because the amount that they had to go fast, and that was what it comes down to. These campuses are smart in getting these cameras now, because we've seen, unfortunately, so many shooting incidents now in campuses. These cameras are everywhere, and it's beneficial for law enforcement to have access and get the best video shot available.
And going back to just Tyler Robinson's mindset, because not only is there the planning, and it's like there's a different gear in your mind if you're actually going to do this to somebody, no matter what you think of someone's political beliefs, is what he's accused of doing to Charlie Kirk. But then to be in a group chat, kind of making jokes, even trying to push friends away, saying like, oh, give me a cut of the $100,000 if you turn me in. Like, that also just seems like there's an extra gear in your mind to try and even blend back into society, to think that you would actually get away with this.
Yeah, he's trying to be covert about it, but that's the thing. The benefit of that, he's trying to be someone else. He's going to say maybe, whatever defense he's going to utilize at that point will be one thing. But yeah, he had nowhere to go. That was the thing. He had no place to go after the event, after the shooting. He had no place to go. So he's just going to say, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. But eventually, law enforcement will find that it's you. This is a murder. It's a murder case. He confronted him. He told him, tell him, turn yourself in, and you have what you have at this point. And would people do that? I can't see why not. I mean, you want to hide your son, your daughter, and it's your kid, but this is a murder. This is a cold, calculated murder. Who's to say he's not going to do it to you or to your family at that point, or your sister, brothers, or anything else like that?
Well, and I think too, I mean, just looking at those messages, and then, there's such a big political part of this. And on this show, we try to stay away from the politics, because so much of this was about the manhunt, the investigation, how this case is going to play out. But when you're talking about a political assassination, in this case, we're looking at, the governor of Utah said, he had leftist ideology. He lived with someone who was, a member of the transgender community. And I'm not kind of talking about that issue, but that does appear to be, we're circling in on somewhat of a motive. And I think my question is more for us in the public. Many people could look and say like, okay, there we go. Charlie Kirk was on the right, he's on the left. That's what it was. But in terms of an investigation, what is the true definition of what a motive actually is?
A motive is to see the why. A lot of times when we talk about these investigations, you'll get the when, the how, the what, the who. The why is always something that's always been out in the stratosphere. Sometimes you get the answer, sometimes you don't. And, when we talk about basic investigations like a robbery or burglary, we get to a point as to why you get that. But when it comes to these type of, murders, these type of an assassination of a public figure, they sometimes will then reach a pulpit. So the why will come out. You'll never hear the real reason as to why unless it comes out in court. And that's why the investigators have to find the why through a background, through going a deep dive into his personal life during this time. And that's why social media gets looked at, bank records, all these things, because we have to determine, is this the only person involved? Was he funded by this? Where did he get the gun from? This is all things that come into play as the investigation goes forward.
And I know I mean, I think back to the Koberger case because that was a high profile one recently. Like, we don't have the motive in that one, but there was a mountain of evidence that clearly he was the person who did it. And I think if he had gone to trial, he was going to be found guilty and sentenced to death in Idaho. In fact, then he takes the plea deal, and we may never know the why in that case. In a case like this, where it also seems like law enforcement is going to just have a lot of evidence. Not only he apparently confessed to his own father, but now is not cooperating with the investigation. How important beyond closure is at this point that we find out what the why is?
A lot of times you won't, and that's this is what happens. Since he's not cooperating, he's lawyered up in a sense. He has an attorney. They're not going to talk anymore, which is within his rights. You're not going to know. We could build a why. We could build based on background. We could build on everything we can see as to why, unless you have some true documentation saying I did this because, like a manifesto, which you've seen by other people who've been involved in these type of things, or postings on social media. We'll get to that point, but this is that why you'll get. You'll not get it from him unless his attorneys decide to kind of put him on the stand and say this isn't me or whatever it's going to be. But I don't see any attorney, district attorney, any defense attorney wanting to put him on the stand, because the district attorney is going to just bury him on the stand.
And you wonder too, because this is at this point, it's a state case, which I think from a visual part of it, cameras can be allowed in court in Utah. If this is a federal case, we won't see anything and they'll just be courtroom sketches. I know you're on the investigative side of it, but what typically goes into when you have a case like this where it was politically motivated? It's of interest to the president and many people who are very politically involved who might want to see federal charges against him. What goes into deciding whether there could be some federal charges here?
Well, that'll be, maybe they'll look into the firearm, something along that makes it an interstate event. He lives in Utah. That's why he kind of pushes off a California thing. He's putting a lot of things into play. It's not going to be easy. I guarantee you the Department of Justice is looking at ways in which they can go federally. But state-wise, what you're doing as investigator is building that case so when the prosecutor presents that case, everything you brought to the table for that can prove the person beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what it comes down to. I always go through this with my students when I teach, is probable cause gets you is kind of like more than reasonable suspicion. You get enough to make the arrest. But you have to build on that arrest. And that's why you have the firearm there. Apparently the tile has his DNA on it. They found the firearm has his DNA on it. Can that be challenged? Absolutely in court. But there's more and more building up now. That's why they do the scrub. They look into social media. They want to see if there's anything else, any transactions, credit card transactions, any monetary transactions. I guarantee you they've got subpoenas for records for Discord and all these other things to see what other conversations he's had, because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there's got to be somewhere along the line, and that's why you build that case, because you're not going to get it from the defendant at this point. You're going to get it from the evidence that the detectives, the investigators bring to the table, and then give it to the prosecutor and say, here you go, do your job.
And I know that in the affidavit that we have to this point, probable cause document, that his family had said he'd become more political in recent years, and it doesn't really go deeper into that, because there's clearly a lot of people I know have gotten more political in recent years, and there's even people I know who aren't friends anymore because they, and I think everybody's family has had that, where people just, I haven't, with somebody, but you just see people that tensions are high in the political world. There's still an extra gear here to go from I'm frustrated with an issue to I'm going to assassinate somebody. How do you go through years of social media to figure out exactly what that looks like?
I wish you could. I wish there's a way in which you could figure that out. I mean, we always look at we always see the FBI goes to active shooters and the like. We always see this coming into play. But here's the problem: the when it happens. We've seen people get radicalized, become angry on one side or the other political spectrum. But to be violent and to do that action at that moment in time, that's something we cannot predict. And that's the one thing we talk about when we talk about these investigations and these shooters is, We know and that's the thing. The only way we know about the shooting is if somebody tells us prior to the incident taking place. And that, all these, we see all these precursors, constantly precursors. But very few people go to violent extents that to, like, in this case, the defendant seems to have gone in this case. It boggles the mind because everyone goes through political spectrums, back and forth, left, right, center, middle, whatever it's going to be, up, down. But to become so radicalized at an age that he is, and I'm talking like from a detective perspective, we're seeing more and more kids not able to handle stresses or never being told no as kids, and then eventually they're like, yes, this is what I want to do, and then they become martyrs for a broken moral compass cause that they create. This higher level of they consider morality, and it's not. You're murdering somebody, and you're murdering for somebody in this case for speech. That's what this is. It's not anything else. That radicalization, we see it. We don't know why it triggers, though, to make action. That's the thing we always see. It just happens.
And I think a scary part of it too, because like words like radicalize, extremist, for a long time, those were really only associated with like ISIS-inspired attacks. And in a lot of those cases, you have young kids who are exposed to parts of the internet that I think for a long time we didn't really understand. But now it's like so many of these cases, whether it's this one, I think back to, gosh, I mean, what mass shooting do you want to pick, unfortunately? And so often it's this part of the internet that I think is missed in a lot of the conversation because, for me, it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I started a TikTok recently. Like what he's on is something I can't even comprehend. From a law enforcement perspective, I mean, Discord is one that comes up a lot. These video games that it's not like you can go to a store and buy them anymore. And it's like they're in a weird corner of the internet. How do you police this and try and figure out these threats?
Well, you can't really police it. What you have to do, unfortunately, is not just police it. You have to find a way. Discord, that's where the young people go. My son is on Discord. He plays his video games and the like that. You have to monitor it as a parent. But, unless you're going to do this hyper monitoring and start doing surveillance on these things, now you're talking about governmental interference in your right to do things, your right to just be on the internet. That was the whole thing about freedom and all of this. You do what you can, but you can monitor it. We have, there are law enforcement agencies that do monitor these things. But in, Discord, there's other ones, there's things that I've never seen. But I can tell you, Discord is a huge, my son has met numerous people through Discord. And what happens is, as everything else, since kids don't go out in the streets anymore, they gravitate via social media. And who knows who's on social media? Because you really don't see who they are. And that's the other thing. This radicalization or this grouping, you become very isolated. They start wearing their headphones. You never hear anything that's going on. You hear laughter in the room, but you don't see anything. As a parent, he's 20-something years old. So, how did this all of a sudden change? The frenzy, the people that he's associated with, help change it, because individually it doesn't happen as much, but somewhere along the line there's that group mentality, that hive mind that comes together where they say this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, and you start agreeing with them, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to be the Holden Caulfield. I'm going to be the catcher in the rye and go out there and save the world.
Right, and it's hard. I mean, I think that's just the constant that seems to come up in so many of these stories. Very different situation from some of the others we've seen in a lot of ways, but I mean, still, like once you saw those bullet inscriptions, meaning internet references, I had no idea what they were talking about. You kind of felt like once again we're talking about these types of cases, and we'll see how the legal part of this plays out. He's due in court on Tuesday. Retired NYPD detective David Sarney, always great to have you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and stay safe.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.